Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and my husband and I recently started a new YouTube channel. It's a cooking YouTube called, well, Cooking with the Koyas. Most of the time you're going to see my husband do the cooking because he does do most of the cooking in the house. I know, I'm very lucky. But I do like to cook, and I'll jump in and make some things also in this channel. He likes to weigh things out and do things a little different than I do. For example, he made an artisan bread. I have done something like a hot fudge cake, 2.5 minutes in a mug. So our styles are completely different. But one thing that he does like is his cooking jacket. Years ago, I did make him a chef's jacket, and he has worn it for years. But it is time for an upgrade. So instead of making a traditional white chef's jacket, I'm going to be making a black one with just a little bit of a white accent. This is going to be a complete surprise for him, so I'm really looking forward to doing it. I have a pattern that I have been using for years, and I have this pattern in every size because I do make these chef's jackets as gifts, and people love them. It's McCall's 2233, so you can get them in different sizes. So it's a fun jacket to make, and even though this is an old pattern, it's still available today. The first jacket I made, I followed the sizing exactly. But I will be making this jacket a little bit longer in the body, and I'm going to make the sleeves a little bit longer. But other than that, the pattern I'm going to be following. And I will be using a black twill fabric. Twill fabric is a very durable fabric for this type of a project. Twill fabric is a cotton polyester, so it's an easy one to also work with. I've extended this hem an extra 6 inches. Because this jacket is a very straight jacket, I was able just to extend it right from adding onto the bottom. So the back was cut out on the fold with that extra 6 inches on the bottom. And I did transfer all of the markings. For the front of the jacket, I did cut to identical pieces. You can add your marks with a tracing wheel or use chalk. The first thing we're going to start with is the jacket front. On the front of the jacket, right at the collar, you're going to notice these 2 dots. Those will be clipping dots, but we need to reinforce those seams. So we will need to just do a line of stitching. So those are the 2 dots, and the stitching is right like that. Now, of course, you would use matching thread. Both of the fronts are treated the same, and the pattern does recommend that you put a row of interfacing. I will not be adding a row of interfacing because I do find this is heavy enough and the fabric doesn't stretch. But I will need to finish this edge off, and I'm going to bring it to my serger and just serge 1 straight row. You will also see in this neckline 2 little triangles or notches. Those notches are going to match together. So when that jacket is folded, those notches are going to match. The first fold we need to do is to fold this over, and this is the good side. When we match those notches, those 2 little dots will also match up. So I had that stay stitching line in that first dot. So with those edges matching, we're going to stitch a 5/8 seam allowance going right to this dot. So we're going to end right there. So this little section is not stitched on. So we have that little end not stitched down, and we need to clip right into that dot. We're not cutting the threads, we're going really close to the threads. And that first row of stay stitching just helps support this. We will be turning this right side out, so we can grade this seam a little bit. Because I want a crisp corner, cut in a little bit right to that corner, and you'll have 1 seam allowance short and the other one a little bit bigger, so it's going to look like a step. When we turn that right side out, we're going to have that little point coming out and the rest of that collar. So we have stitched, notched, turned it right side out. So we have that clean edge, and now that edge here, which is still raw. Baste that little edge together. Put both the left and right facing up, and then we're going to put on that back and match up those shoulders. Be sure both the right sides of the fabric are touching. Pin those shoulders together and stitch a 5/8 seam allowance. And for the chef's jacket, I do like to open those seams up so they're flatter along that top of the shoulder. The next thing we're going to work on is the collar. I'm going to have a white collar facing in towards the neck and a black on the outside. So I need to match right sides together, and I need to put a layer of interfacing. So I did put a fusible interfacing on that lighter fabric and then press that bottom seam up 5/8 of an inch. Match up those edges, stitch starting off of that fabric, going all the way around and coming off. So we're doing that big top shape. We need to grade that seam allowance, which means we're making that little step again. And having that fabric 2 different widths for that seam allowance makes it a very flat seam. Now turn that right side out and press those edges so you have a nice flat seam. The black side is going to fit the right side of that jacket, and we're going to fit that seam on where we have that notch. The fabrics are going to match up, and we're going to be able to just stitch right along that area. With that back stitched on, we can trim a little bit of that seam allowance so it's going to come over, and that seam is going to tuck up right inside. Because you ironed that seam allowance over by that 5/8, it's going to match up. You're going to be able to do a little hand stitch and stitch that down. So we have that front piece, and inside here was that rest that had that little flip over and the collar. That's all there is to doing this collar. Let's work on the sleeves next. The sleeve has these 2 pieces, and they're going to be joined together, so we will have that one big sleeve. And you do have those notches to join up those pieces. When those pieces are together, we're going to see this little notch, and that's going to match that piece that is the cuff. But we do need to sew these 2 pieces together first. When we match up these 2 seams, we're going to be able to start and stop right up at the top. But when we come down, we need to stop at this intersection. And on the pattern, you will see a dot, and that is a 5/8 inch coming in. So we need to stop or start right there. So this area will not be stitched. So match up right sides and stitch that 5/8 seam allowance. Finish off your edges and then press those seams open and flat. The directions have us sew this onto the jacket first, do the side seams, and then put the cuff on last. But there's a way we can put the cuff on now. So we need to prepare the cuff. This is a nice area to put some decorative stitching, names, anything that you'd like, because the cuff is usually rolled up, so you're going to see that stitching. You will also need to take that top part and press it in about 1/4 of an inch. That will be the finished edge. So we can match up those 2 edges, and we will need to stitch a 5/8 coming down. But I'd recommend doing one side and then doing the next. We're going to be able to stitch from the sleeve side, fold that seam allowance out of the way, and we can start stitching right there in that dot. Put the needle in, stitch down and over. And we can do the same thing on this side. If you'd like, you could start with the needle off the fabric, stitch on and up, stopping right at that point, or you start right at that point. So this is going to leave that seam allowance free. So stop and start right there at that point, which now means this is all left open. Take a pair of scissors and snip right to that point. That's going to make it easier for us to turn. and grade those seam allowances. We can cut off those little points. And I'm getting right close to that thread. Now turn this right side out. And if you have a little pucker here, it's because you didn't trim close enough to that stitching. So you can pull it back and trim a little closer. Press this edge, but do not do any more stitching. I find the easiest way to match these up together is to have both the good sides facing up, and that way I can make sure my notches are correct. Then I can fold that sleeve up onto the jacket. Match my center point, match my double notch and my single notch, and then sew that seam in with a 5/8 seam allowance. When we sew the sleeve on, we're going to be able to press those seam allowances to the sleeve. And then from there, we will be able to match up those sides. So we'll be able to stitch those sides. That sleeve will match up. And then when we come down to this cuff part, we need to match up that white cuff and stitch right on, opening up that pressed seam. Press those seams open all the way along the sleeve and down the side. Repress that little seam over and then pull that cuff to the back. It's already been pressed, so it'll go over very easily. You can hand stitch this cuff down or put it in a free arm and stitch all the way along the edge. So we're going to stitch that seam allowance in, and you will see a row of stitching along the front. With that seam stitched down, when the cuff comes up, we have that little V in the back of the sleeve, and this is one of the noticeable trademarks for a cooking jacket. And I do have my writing on the front part. So we have the collar, the sleeves with the cuffs on. Now we need to work on the hem. The pattern recommends a 1/4 inch hem. I like to do an inch hem. I just like the extra weight on the bottom. There are 2 lines in the pattern in the front. One is the facing line and one is the center front. When we did fold these pattern pieces together, that fold did line up to that facing line. We need to have that fold the same up here at the top as we do at the bottom. So that jacket is folded over, and that distance is going to be the same distance along the bottom. Fold those edges together so that the right sides are touching, and match up that bottom edge. We need to do this to both the left and the right side. Whatever your hem is the stitch you're going to be stitching. If you want to do a 1/4 inch, you will do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can do it just to this area where it's folded. I will be doing 1 inch. So this will be my stitching line. When those little edges have been stitched down, trim off this point. So we're going to take that corner off. And this top area, we can make that a smaller seam allowance. So we still have that original 1 inch, and that seam here is just a little bit smaller. Now we can turn this to the right side. So we have that entire front piece right from that top to the hem. This has left us with an inch hem hanging over. I can continue pinning that 1 inch hem down and stitch. With the hem done, the last thing we need to do is put on the buttons. If it's a man's jacket, the buttonholes will go on the left. If it's a woman's, the buttonholes go on the right. So find your markings from the pattern, put your buttonholes in, and put your buttons on. I did add the pocket on very last instead of first because I wasn't sure if I was going to put a white pocket or a black pocket. The buttons are done, the buttonholes are done, those beautiful split cuffs are done. The jacket is now done. Now I know my husband is upstairs in the kitchen cooking, so I'm going to call him down and surprise him with a new jacket. Evo, can you come down here? I don't know if you could hear that or not, but he said, just a minute, I'm cooking. So let me set the camera up. Oh, too late. He's coming down. Okay, stop there for a second. I need to reset the camera, so you're going to be on the camera. Hold on. All right, you can come now.
Okay, this is a bit exciting.
Okay, well, come over here.
Oh, okay.
I want my viewers to see you.
Okay, I was just in the middle of making a roasted red pepper bread.
I know. Oh, hold on. I cut off his head. Hold on, guys. There we go. So say hi.
Hello, everyone.
This needs to go.
No, I have my other.
Yes, I know, and I made you a new one.
This one I like to wear when I'm making bread or pizzas.
Well, you can get rid of them all.
Oh, I can't get rid of that. I can't get rid of that.
Okay.
This
How about
one,
this?
black?
How about this one?
Oh, my. Oh, you made it black, too, eh? Beautiful. Oh, wow. Laura, this is super nice.
Look.
Oh my goodness. Cooking with the Koyas. I love it. You got my name on here. That's spectacular. I almost don't want to use it now. It's too nice.
Well, the other one's got to go.
Okay, we'll see what the first stain is I put on this one.
As long as it's red wine, you won't notice.
It's absolutely perfect. It's not too tight. I can move around in it for when I'm cooking.
Yeah, turn around. I want them to see the back sleeve.
Yeah.
No, a little too far, a little bit too far. So that two-piece sleeve, you had that larger portion here and that smaller portion here. So that's where you end up with, give me your arm, end up with that nice little V. So there we go.
Okay.
One cooking jacket to go with my husband's new cooking channel. And well, you will see me there sometimes too, but he does the majority of the cooking, so I can do all the sewing. So thank you for joining me or joining us today on So Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. See what we're cooking or sewing in the sewing room. Bye for now.
Love it.